Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the history programme with the Limerick Historical Society. And it's me again, Tony Browne, and as usual, I have with me Tom Donovan. Tom and myself, of course, do these programmes, as most of you know, on a regular basis, and we try to vary the programmes between different areas, different people, and different aspects of local history, mainly Irish history and local history at that. And today we've with me John Flannery from the Ormond Historical Society. See, I know John what OHS means. It isn't the Hibernian Order, you know, the Ormond Historical Society. John, you're welcome to the programme anyway.
Thanks very much, Tony. Good to see you.
John, you're involved with the Historical Society for quite a while, under the Ormond Society.
I would, Tony. For more years than I'd care to remember, put it that way.
Tell me about this.
I served for 3 years as secretary and was president there for 5 years.
Yeah, you lost a good member there. I didn't know actually that he died. Michael Joy. Michael
was a fantastic historian, particularly in relation to the slate quarries there in Portroe. And he's a fantastic archive, which thankfully has been preserved.
That's it. You know that. Yeah. Michael was a lovely man, you know, and I was very friendly with him. The last time actually I met him was at a talk on the other side of the Shannon. It was over in Tumgraney. We went over to a talk over there, and that was the last time I met him. I didn't know he died, and I would have been at his funeral. It's about 2 years ago. Was it 3 years ago he's dead?
I'd say it's probably at this stage closer to 4.
Yeah.
3, yeah.
I didn't know that he died, you know. Anyway, we'll get on. We'll talk. What I'd like to talk about, John, is Nina. Although very close to Limerick, and still it is kind of it never had much connection to Limerick as such.
I wouldn't agree. I mean, would say in terms of economic outlook, would say Nina would always have gone to Limerick. Would have been the city town, would say, for Nina. I mean, I remember as a kid going to Limerick to do the Christmas shopping date of December and things like that, you know. Nesters.
Like if you look at the old copies of the Nina Guardian, John, there was lots of Limerick firms advertising it. So that
there were, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, from the very beginning, Nina would have been advertised. But I remember, would say, as a young lad, going to Nesters in December. I mean, it's just pure paradise for a young fella. You know, so I would say kind of there was that affinity to Limerick. And then, of course, we'll say the sporting, I mean, Nina people would flock in their droves to matches in the Gaelic grounds, some of the big duels between Tipperary and Limerick. They were played in the Gaelic grounds there. You'd have had huge Nina contingents travelling to those, both by railway and road.
But Nina itself, John, is first of all, I think the thing that comes to mind with me anyway is that we call it the castle, the Round Tower in Nina. There are very few cylindrical kind of buildings like that. You know,
the keep, as we'll call it. That was the central core of the castle, which dates from about, we reckon it was built between 1200 and 1220. But the origins of Nina actually go back further than that. Now, the castle, I suppose, would have been the foundation of the modern town, if you like. But the origins of a settlement in Nina go back further than that. And if you like, the clue is in the name, Nina, which derives from Enoch, or the fair. And it refers to the fair of Northeast Munster. Some people would date it to pre-Christian days, but certainly there's documentary evidence of it in the Annals of the Four Masters. And it was centered on what's kind of a group of Iron Age ring forts to the northeast of the current town. One of them measures with the largest of the 3 forts, or sorry, the largest of the 6 forts there, is a 3-ringed or 3-valley fort measuring 170 meters in circumference, and with a church inside in the central circle. Now there is records of a battle being fought very close to that. In fact, two battles. Brian Boru was supposed to have been defeated in a battle in 994 there by Mel Shockland, and there was another battle recorded as being fought close there in 1056. And these stories seem to be pretty true, because in 1864, when the railway line was being extended from Lochjordan to Nina, it would say come right alongside that area, about by 600, 700 meters to the north of that ring fort. And while they were digging out for the railway there, they came across a huge amount of bones, which obviously had died violently. I mean, the bones were broken, skulls were cracked, things like this. And there was absolutely hundreds of remains found there, plus weapons like swords and spearheads, things like that.
How far outside Nina, John, is this about? How far in distance, like?
Well, in distance from Nina.
Yeah.
Probably about 2 miles outside the town.
I don't know, yeah.
2 to maybe 3 miles out.
But these are with the O'Briens of Allah.
Which?
The O'Briens of Allah. Wasn't they a powerful family?
They were. Well, Nina would have been mainly a centre of the O'Kennedys.
The Kennedys, yeah.
There was three families of the O'Kennedys: the O'Kennedy Fionn, the O'Kennedy Down, and the O'Kennedy Dove. And they would have held all the hinterland of Nina, and they would say, been rivals of the McBryens of Ara. Shall we say, there'd be an uneasy relationship there for centuries. And it was the coming of the Normans, really, Theobald Fitzwalter, that really broke the power of the local chieftains. And he's reputed to have arrived in Nina around the year 1200. Now, he died in 1201, having set up the third of 3 monastic foundations that he founded in Ireland in Nina. The other 2 being in Arklow and in Abington, which is just there on the outskirts of Maru. He founded Abbey Downey. Now, we know that more than likely the abbey he founded in Nina wasn't complete when he died in 1201, because there's records of he'd been buried in Abbey Downey, and he established Nina as his headquarters. So had the abbey been completed, he would more than likely have been buried in the abbey in Nina. As I said, the records document that he was buried under the high altar in Abbey Downey. Unfortunately, the abbey is long gone.
So obliterated altogether. There's nothing at all of it left, you know.
No, there is a few stones actually in the college there in Maru, Glenstall Abbey, which they're more than likely they came from Abbey Downey.
Oh yeah, well in Lennon's history Limerick now, he gives a good bit about Abbey Downey and about that it was a very big place, and he goes into detail. But of course, like that, he says he does mention there's a few stones left. You know, the whole thing, obliterated really.
But Theobald Fitzwalter's, the account of Theobald Fitzwalter's funeral states that it took actually 3 days to travel from Nina to Abbey Downey, and that it was attended by all the Irish chieftains of the time, all the O'Kennedys, the McBryens. They all came and travelled in the entourage, with that funeral to Abbey Downey.
Yeah.
But no, he had commenced the building of the castle, but it was in the time of his son, Theobald Walter II, that the castle was completed, and it was the tower now as it stands would have been only about 1/3 the height of its current height. Yeah. You can actually see the lines of masonry.
Yeah, are you familiar? Tom, are you familiar with that round tower, we'll call it?
I am, yeah.
With a 10-foot seat when you drive in, you know.
It's on the bottom of saucepans. Is that the Castle Brand? Is that the tower that put on the Castle Brand?
It's there it's there between the 2 churches. Actually open to the public. It was refurbished there some years ago. A roof put on it, so you can go right to the top of it, just over 100 feet high, and there's a fantastic view of the surrounding countryside from it. It's open every day except Monday.
Was that the tower that was on the Castle Brand, John? The Castle Brand husbands.
It was used as the logo for many years for Castle Brand, the Irish Aluminium Company. Still a few pots and pans that stay surviving around the country.
I think we have one. Yeah, they were great. They were great for great pot for the range.
They were,
it's on the milk too, isn't it? Is it Alabama one of those?
It is. Yeah, it's on the Arabon cartons. Yeah.
Because you often see it and things though. But I remember it on the bottom of the pots, where it was the emblem and the bottom of the old pots.
It's a very iconic building. I mean, it's like Nina is down in a bit of a hollow, and no matter which side of the town you're approaching from, you can actually see the crenellated top of the tower standing out, I would say, above the buildings there.
Yeah. When the Normans were kind of, let's say, I hate using the thing, became more Irish than the Irish themselves. But anyway, who moved in then before we said?
The town remained in possession of the Butler family right up to 1703. And the second Duke of Ormond actually sold the town, the property rights of the town to a Galway man by the name of Nehemiah Donovan in 1703. And he retained that until 1733, when he sold it to a local man by the name of Robert Holmes. Now, Holmes lived outside the town, like close to Lough Derg.
I know who you mean now.
It's called Peterfield.
Yeah, I didn't know the Donlans had it now. These are the Donlans up in Ballydonlan, I presume, up near Loch Ray.
It would be.
Yeah, I didn't realise that they owned it. But you mentioned that then when you passed it on, then you said to the Homes. Homes are above in the lovely houses, and the shores of Loch Derg up there.
That's right, Peterfield. Unfortunately, that house is gone. That house was designed by a man who subsequently won the award for the design of the town of Westport. And he was responsible for a lot of, we'll say, large houses around Nina, including Kilboy, which was rebuilt some years ago by a son of Tony Rhines.
Yeah. But and what happened when Holmes then? What happened about Holmes? Did he still own the town? What happened after?
Well, he fell on hard times. He was in the encumbered estates courts in the 1860s, and he sold off a lot of the ground rents of Nina, would say, in a huge sale. The maps which were compiled actually for that are still used by solicitors in Nina today when they'd be doing conveyancing. Like the encumbered estates court did these big proposals when they were preparing for an auction, and very carefully.
Yeah, when they sold, when the ground rents were sold, were they sold individually, like in Limerick, or were they sold to somebody again who bought a load of them? Or?
They were sold in about, I suppose, something up to maybe 30 different blocks.
Oh yeah.
We'll say 30 or more blocks, I would say. So a lot of them fell into the hands of local families who would have had. Like I remember as a child growing up in Nina, and there was one woman living on the street, and she actually had the ground rent of, I would say, about 10 or 12 properties along the street. And you'd often be called by someone, would say, live in the house, and given an envelope, would you, you drop the envelope up to this person, and hang on a minute, like, and she'd give you a receipt and put it back in the envelope, and you'd be asked to drop it back down, whoever it was. But I remember that well now. That was in the, we'll say, the mid-60s.
Was that in the 60s up to probably the 70s? The law was changed,
Yeah, a lot of things changed in it. I think a lot of the ground rents were bought out in the 70s. The 80s.
But there must have been small amounts, wouldn't there? Probably,
like
£2 and £3.
Well, I remember now some of the ones I delivered. said, and saying the woman opened the envelope, it would be 10 shilling note would be in.
Yeah,
And that would probably be for 6 months.
yeah.
It probably been paid twice a year, probably maybe £1 or let's say 150, something like that.
That wouldn't have happened now, Tom and Glen. The Glen would have been really out too.
No, those governments still not sorted out in Glyn.
Was it?
Yeah. The Night of Glyn and the Cray family, actually, the Cray family still own some of the, they're in South Africa, they still own some of the town of Glyn, the ground rents. And I was talking to a man recently, he's trying to sort it out. But they see the ground rents were based on the valuation in Griffith's valuation, and they were never adjusted for inflation. So 10 shillings in 1852 would be a sizable sum, but by 1962, it wasn't, it wouldn't break the bank, like, you know. So that's why. But no, the Night of Glyn sought off his ground rents back in the 1980s. You know, he did deals up to 60s, 70s, 80s. So there was ground rents all the time, you know.
Yeah.
Even though the people owned the property, but they didn't own the ground.
Yeah, the same was Limerick. Limerick, John, would you know or not, I have a huge book at home called The Sale of Limerick. It took 3 days to sell it. So the other Limerick sold off Limerick.
Right, yeah.
It took 3 days, and I have, like you said, the maps are in it as well. But it doesn't tell you as to who actually bought them.
It'd be a good study. It'd be a good study, you know.
Well, I'm afraid I have to admit, I have to admit.
Tenants at the time.
Yeah. Well, in Limerick, there was another certain historical society that I wanted that done, and it was never done, unfortunately.
Yeah, Tony, I was asking you there, does that sale book actually list who had the tenancies?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, because I've seen the one for Castle Otway in County Tipperary, there in Templederry, just outside Nina, and that actually lists all the tenants, with the unusual feature standing out that the only tenant in the Castle Otway estate that held a freehold was actually a Limerick man, Father John Kenyon.
Yeah.
And one of the Otways had actually granted him a site for the chapel and for the house in Templederry, and they were given freehold with no ground rent.
I remember Tony Ryan, the car salesman, Tony Senior, told me his grandfather came to Castle Otway as a coachman. So he maintains he's carrying on the tradition of transport, you know.
Right. Very good.
Yeah.
The Otways, they actually allowed, it's amazing they allowed that really, to let Father Kenyon have the property as such. You know?
Well, I mean, to me, I think it stands very much to the credit of the Otway family.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll say one of the predecessors of that family, Cook Otway, like in 1798, he had a ferocious reputation. He actually whipped, I don't know if you're familiar, well, we mentioned it earlier, the Moon and Sixpence pub. Well, further up that street would have been what was known as the Turnpike of Nina.
Yes.
Cook Otway whipped 2 men in 1798 from the Turnpike of Nina to the Market Cross, which is the cross there in the centre of the town. They were basically horsewhipped, they were stripped to the waist and horsewhipped full length of the town, what would have been the town at the time. I suppose it's over a mile in distance, like, like, you know, it was a horrendous punishment in the day, but both men actually survived.
Yeah. Oh, there's some of them in Limerick, in Lenihan gives some people getting 600 lashes. Yeah. 600, you know. And
then you take the contrast, we'll say, just a few short years later in the 1860s, and you have the Otway family handing over the site of the Catholic Church in Templederry, plus the site for the local priest. And he was a regular guest in the house. I mean, he used to be invited, Father Kenyon used to be invited to dinner in Castle Otway, and he had some pretty strong debates with the Otways. I mean, the Otways would have been a unionist family, and Kenyon, I mean, he was the rebel priest, had been silenced on a number of occasions by the Bishop of Killaloe for his Fenian, well, for his Young Ireland activities.
Yeah.
There's a lovely little yellow booklet, the Minute series on Castle Otway.
There is, yeah.
I read it one time.
I've
Yes.
never seen that.
Yeah.
No, no.
Right?
See, have you
Yeah,
that on the bill?
I have. Yeah.
Miriam Lamb actually is the author of that.
Oh,
Miriam Lamb.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Shouldn't have told me Tom had that now. Anyway, we'll move away from
Yeah,
that.
you will have it, Tony.
But getting back to Nina itself, you explained Ormond. I could never figure that out. How the Duke of Ormond, who would be his base was Kilkenny, obviously, right? And then he's associated. You just don't associate him with Nina as
No,
such.
you see, the first centre for the Butlers really was Nina, because they built Nina Castle. That was their first stronghold. Now, the state of war from their arrival existed, and that continued into the 13th and 14th centuries. And there's several treaties signed. One notable one in 1356, which unfortunately, in 1963, during the visit of John F. Kennedy, our government saw fit to hand the original Treaty of Nina to John F. Kennedy as a gift.
Okay.
And it's in the basement of the Kennedy Library in Boston, not even on display at this stage. Some Nina people have made strenuous attempts to try and get it returned to have it in the castle here in Nina, but to date those efforts have failed, which is a pity, really.
The thing is, John, you should ask for a loan of it, like Tony Browne does with books. Like Tony Browne does with my books. He takes a loan of it, and I never can see it.
They did offer to give, no, they wouldn't even give it a loan, Tom. They did offer a similar, but
You loaned that for a few minutes, you know.
it's still in the lap of the gods, shall we say. But there was actually 3 treaties signed, we'll say, at various points between the O'Kennedys and the Butlers. Now, 2 of those treaties are still in existence in the National Library. One of them, unfortunately, is in Boston. But then in the 15th century, the castle in Nina actually passed into the hands of the Brownes, and the Butlers were gone. But at that stage, they moved to Gowran and subsequently into Kilkenny itself. But they did come back, we'll say, claiming ownership in Nina. In 1533, the castle came back into the hands of the Butlers and remained so up until the 1641 rebellion. And in 1641, it was taken by Phelim O'Neill, who held it until it was retaken by Inchi Quinn. And in 1650, it was back again in the hands of the Ormonds, who took it over from George Hamilton, who was a Cromwellian. Now, Hamilton was besieged by Ireton, and again it fell back into Cromwellian hands. And it's that was, I mean, the castle was constantly being besieged and taken by one side and the other, right up until 1692, when it was actually dismantled.
Yeah, there's a shop has always intrigued me going up in Nina when years ago when we were going to Dublin. It's the only time I came across the name outside of Dallas. Ewing. There was a name over the door, Ewing.
Yeah, there were a family of jewelers in Nina.
Because I never had the money Bobby Ewing, you know, and I also put the name over the door. She's like the one Tom in Foynes.
Esbury.
Yeah. It's funny.
That's Palatine.
Yeah, when you're going through a town sometimes or a village, you often see a name that you know kind of didn't fit in, you know. With
the Southwark are probably there in Castle Street or Pierce Street in Nina. Ewing's there. The last the family, she was a spinster there. She died, I suppose, in the mid-70s.
And is the name gone now? Has the name gone?
It's gone.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
You know,
were they Jewish family, John? Or
no, they weren't. No, they were.
No. Sometimes jewelers were.
Yeah.
You know, it's a strange name. I thought it might be a Jewish family.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
John, when you go straight out up the hill there, what about the old army barracks that's there? There was a huge barracks inside there on the right hand side. Has that been revived or?
Unfortunately, Tony, that's in a absolute state of decay. The roof would have fallen in there in the last year or so. It was abandoned by the Department of Defence back in the 80s. And some of the buildings, we'll say the gatehouse now and what was the armory and the detention cells, they're preserved. There's a preservation order on them, but they're not actively being looked after. And there are two buildings on which would have been parts of the officers' quarters in the barracks, which are still in very good condition and could easily be put into use.
Are you familiar, Tom, with this building?
Is that what the museum was?
No.
No.
That was part of the jail where the
museum. The jail,
yeah. No, this building is going up somewhere up.
Barracks, which was built towards the end of the Crimean War.
Beautiful building, huge concern.
It was a fine army barracks, and it was home to several regiments of the army during colonial times.
Oh, the army barracks, I know that.
Taken over in 1922 by the IRA, and subsequently became a National Army barracks up until 1926.
What's to become of it like? Nothing?
My own wish, and I'd be fighting hard for it, would be that that the existing buildings anyway would be brought back into use as a military museum, because Nina is a fantastic military history.
Yeah.
There's probably more medals of honor won by American generals and American soldiers associated with Nina than any single town in Ireland. I think we have the distinction of having 5 medals of honor, 3 Victoria Crosses. There's a tradition of, we'll say, service in the Irish Army. A lot of Nina people served with the UN in Lebanon. So there's a long tradition. Dating back to the Battle of Rathurles that I mentioned back in, we'll say, time of Brian Boru, right through 1600s, like all the major battles, the Cromwellian period, they're all represented there in Nina. 1798, the 1841 rebellion, the Fenian, one of the largest Fenian trials outside of Nina was held in Nina. Outside of Dublin was held in Nina in 1867, lasting 3 days, where 135 Fenians were tried during the week. We actually reenacted that trial some years ago for the 150th anniversary of the Fenian Rising. So there is a tremendous military history there, and it should be well documented. Like, so much so that one will say in 1903, an American general who had been born in Nina arrived in Cork with the intention, and stayed 2 nights with his sister with the intention of getting the train to Nina to visit the town. And on the morning he was due to leave Cork, he suffered a fatal heart attack. And the family brought him up to Nina, and he was buried just outside the town at Kilkerry. And when news reached America that Emmett Ewell had been buried in Nina, there was consternation. And the American government sent a petition to the Urban Council in Nina looking for permission to exhume his body and take him back to Washington. And permission was granted. A local undertaker was engaged to exhume the body, and it was taken down to Cove and put on board an American destroyer that came in. And there was a casket placed on the foredeck of the destroyer, and it was taken back to sail up the Chesapeake River to Baltimore. And one of the largest funerals in Washington was for a Nina man who was buried with full military honors in.
What was his name again, John?
Michael Emmett Ewell, Urrell.
Yeah, you have to tell now. But his people were from Nina, obviously.
Nina, lived Riverston outside Nina.
Oh, Riverston, yeah.
Just there opposite the swimming pool in Nina.
Before we talk about the jail in a second, you mentioned there now Rathurles, right? Now that, to me, now my mind, the way it works, would I be right in the pronunciation of Brewton?
That's right, yeah.
They're Raturlis, would they?
They're Raturlis. The family is still there. The large fort or rat is actually on their lands, and they're actually buried in the church in the centre of that rat.
Who's buried?
The Brereton family. That's their family burial ground is in the church in the centre of the rat.
Just I came across the name a few times. We're connecting now with Raturlis. I hadn't realised now what we were talking about. Now I do.
Again, it ties into the military history of Nina in that Todd Brereton, who would have been the grandfather of the present owner of that, he was a fighter pilot in World War II, and he was shot down in a Spitfire over France, 1941, and was a prisoner of war for the remainder of the war.
Yeah, funny. Getting on to talking about the Thomas said a while ago about the museum, the jail inside, of course, we talk about the jail, you mentioned the McCormicks, of course, obviously, they come to mind straight away. But roughly, tell us about the museum and that, John.
Well, the jail was built in 1838, the government decided that on a petition, on foot of a petition from the jurists, we'll say the members of the grand jury of Tipperary, who were complaining that it was too much of a hardship to have to travel by coach and horse to Clonmel for the yearly assizes. And they were saying that by the time they got to Clonmel, all the decent lodgings were gone, and that they were forced to put down their heads in doss houses and flea holes, and were very upset over this. So they petitioned the government to divide the county of Tipperary into two ridings, a north and south riding, similar to Yorkshire in England. And the petition was granted. And after that, then the battle started as to where the assizes town was going to be. And it was the success in that battle, really, which was the making of Nina. I mean, Nina would have been a very small town right up to the granting of, in 1838, of assizes status for Nina. And in 1838, the first North Tipperary assizes were held in Nina. And they were held in the old session house in what's known as Pound Street or Sarsfield Street in Nina.
Whereabouts is that? Where is that building gone, is it?
That's, we'll say, if you were coming into Nina from Limerick.
Yes.
And the street you'd come in through there, past the Dap Inn pub on your left-hand side. That's Pound Street. And the Pound was actually located quite close there to the Dap Inn. But the original barracks, we'll say, and session house in Nina were just further down the street there. There's a terrace of local authority houses there now. But that would have been the site of the original session house there in Nina. And the court in 1838 was held there, and the judge recommended the building of a new courthouse as a suitable location to hold the assizes.
And this is what we have up to the present day near the courthouse there, is it?
So in 1840, the commencement of that courthouse that you see today in the square there in Nina, the courthouse and jail, they were built to design of a John B. Keane, who was responsible for a lot of jail designs in Ireland. He designed the courthouse in Tullamore and the courthouse in Ennis also. He won the contract to design both buildings, and the contract to build them was awarded to a Nina man, John Hanley of Summerhill. So work commenced in 1840, and the jail was handed over in 1841 to the Board of Guardians, we'll say. And the first assizes were held in 1841 in Nina, on foot of which 3 people were hung in the town.
Well, what about the connection between the McCormicks then? The McCormick brothers?
No, the Cormac's were the last people to be hung in Nina, two brothers. They were hung in the wrong, many people believe. and the evidence would certainly point in that direction. They were hung for the murder of a land agent of Trent of Devey, which is over near Thurles, a man by the name of Ellis. He was shot dead. Now, he was reputed to have had relations with a sister of the Cormac's, as he did with several women in the area, and was reputed to have, let's say, left her in child, as they said at the time. So that was the motive that the Cormac's were arrested for and subsequently executed. Now, there was 2 trials for the Cormac's. In the first, the jury could find no case, and William Cormac, who had been tried separate to his brother, was acquitted. However, on leaving the courthouse in Enna, he was rearrested, and there was a new trial commenced, and 2 brothers were put on trial themselves. And such was the Crown saw such an importance in this trial that they actually sent down the Attorney General to prosecute the trial, which really, we'll say, if you think of it, was kind of given way to quite a travesty of justice, because any subsequent appeal to be lodged on behalf of the Cormac's was going to have to go through the Attorney General. So by the Attorney General prosecuting the trial, it was prejudicing one of the grounds of appeal that the brothers would actually have. And the trial commenced in the autumn sessions of 1857, and the brothers were found guilty and sentenced to be hung in May of 58. Now, there was numerous appeals made on their behalf, but the very last appeal went to the Lord Lieutenant, and he just said, he was given the evidence on the grounds of the appeal, but he said, let justice proceed. He just didn't decided to let things stand as they were. And
you feel it down with
there.
Yeah.
So if you're standing at the gate of the St. Mary's Roman Catholic Church there in Nina, and you look across at what's the entrance to the present convent. Now, the gateway into the convent was actually the gatehouse of the jail, and that was where the hangings were conducted. And up the gatehouse, there's now there's a statue of the Blessed Virgin, but the windows behind that statue were actually 2 doors which opened out onto a scaffold platform on which there was 2 trapdoors, twin trapdoors. Excuse me. And because one lever, those trapdoors could both be opened, and we'll say 2 people could be hung simultaneously there. The bottom of the platform was surrounded with a black drape, and we'll say the victims dropped about 12 feet, and they were left suspended for 20 minutes or until the reckoned life was extinct, and then they were cut down, and the bodies were taken into the jail and buried inside. Now, in the course of between 1841, when the first hangings took place there, and when the Cormac brothers were hung in 1858, there was 17 people hung. There was 2 triple hangings, 3 double hangings, and the rest were singles.
And John, where were the Shears brothers then?
The Shears brothers were hung in Kilmainham.
Oh yeah, but where was their connection?
They were from County Offaly.
All right. So that even though the street in Nina is named after them, they had no connection with Nina.
No, there's no, we don't have any street named after the Shears brothers.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was a Shears. There's a Silver Street, is there?
There's Silver Street, yeah.
What's that?
Well, that was named from silver mines. Like that was brought to the silver mines.
All right. Yeah.
No, a lot of the you touched on a good topic there, Tom, in that a lot of the streets in Nina have 2 names. Like,
that's right.
I remember, again, back as a young fella, there was a collection made in our class in school to buy the nameplate for the street that led up to the school, which was Silver Street, and that had been changed to Connolly Street. And there's a famous photograph in existence of, let's say, a local contractor putting up the sign Shroddy Conneela, Connolly Street, at the end of the street. Now, subsequently, the people of Silver Street which was the street I lived on actually at the time. But they objected to the change of name, and it was found that the name had been changed illegally, if you like, that no plebiscite of the residents had taken place, and one was introduced, and they decided to revert back to the name of Silver Street. So it's still Sherrod and Arrogate or Silver Street, whereas a lot of the streets, like the main street, Pierce Street now, that was formerly called Castle Street. Again, Emmett Place would have been known as Bank Place, but Mitchell Street would have been Queen Street. Pound Street is now Sarsfield Street. And a lot of the old people in town would still refer to the older names of the town. Like Kenyon Street would have been Barrack Street. And again, it's a name that creates confusion, because a lot of people would think that Barrack Street came from the old Garda Barracks, or previously RIC Barracks, which existed midway down the street. But in actual fact, the name Barrack Street came from a foot barracks, which was down, let's say, for one of the British regiments that was based in Neenah in the 1800s. And the barrack was down at the very end of that street.
And that happened in lots of towns and villages with streets. That happened in Limerick as well. My mother, my aunt would always refer to the old names, you know. Get 5 or 6 seconds for you to cop on to where they were talking about, you know. Why Silver Street?
As I say, it led to silver mines. Like, there's the road out to silver mines, which were, I mean, in the latter years, silver mines was famous as one of the largest lead and zinc mines in Europe. But the original mines in Neenah would have been silver. We'll say in silver mines would have been silver mines. Genoese miners came over there in about the year 900. And there's records of them mining there for a couple of centuries. And in the rebellion of 1641, one of the O'Kennedys actually massacred miners in silver mines. They were from Cornwall. And he was subsequently hung in Neenah Castle. Himself and his son were hung in the grounds of Neenah Castle for the massacre of those miners. And they're mentioned in the 1641 depositions, which are in Trinity College.
Before we get away from the McCormick brothers, wasn't there something then, because I know where they're buried now, wasn't there something about they
were buried in the grounds of Neenah Jail up until the establishment of a convent in the demolition of most of the blocks of the jail in 1912. And in 1910, a petition commenced for the exhumation of started with the Cormac brothers, but would say subsequently for all the 17 prisoners that had been buried there. And in 1912, on foot of an exhumation order not being granted, the bodies were exhumed and recoffined. They were taken into the Church of St. Mary's there in Neenah, and the following day a mass was held, a requiem mass was held, and they were conveyed to Lochmore, their native place outside Templemore there for burial. And the head of that funeral, actually, would say the coffins had arrived in Borrisolee, and the end of the funeral hadn't left Neenah. That was the extent of the funeral. It's just over 12 miles.
I know where they're buried, because I'm friendly with a priest, but you know him a lot now. God, I haven't seen him for a while now. Morris Dooley. He was PP in Castleiney, near there in Templemore. He brought me up one time now to show me that grave where the McCormicks were.
Yeah, they're buried in a fantastic mausoleum with a flight of steps. There's 2 mosaic panels either side of the doorway of that mausoleum, and one has a description of Judge Keogh, who was the judge in the trial. Now, Keogh died in Germany, but if you read the epitaph, we'll say, for Keogh on the cross erected to his honour by Irish people in Germany, and you read the epitaph that's written on the mausoleum of the Cormac brothers to him, you'd wonder were the 2 epitaphs to the same person. The one in Lochmore describes him as one of the most scurrilous individuals that ever walked in shoe leather, and has nothing whatsoever good to say about him. But the Celtic cross erected in Bonn in Germany in his memory, describes in glowing terms this wonderful Irishman. So you'd wonder, like, where the truth lies. I suppose somewhere
In the middle.
more, I suppose, towards the side of the Cormac brothers, really. He was Keogh was referred to as the leader of the Pope's brass band. Like, he was a Catholic judge, but he was very much pro the crown.
Well, in your opinion, were the McCormick brothers, were they innocent, or were they?
I would believe so. Yeah, I mean, there is record of a man subsequently confessing to the murder.
Yeah.
Oh.
And he was a person that would have had grounds, because he'd been evicted by Ellis a year or two previous to the murder. And in fact, one of the principal witnesses, the carter, will say, that was driving the cart that Ellis was sitting on when he was killed, he subsequently gave evidence to the RIC men that were conveying him to the train in Ballabrophy, that he'd give perjured evidence. And they brought the news back to Nina that this guy had given perjured evidence, and he was actually brought back from Liverpool. But the Crown decided that would be too much of an embarrassment, really, if the case was reopened, and that nothing could be gained by reopening it, because the executions had been carried out.
Yeah. An appalling vista.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the original appalling vista.
Yeah.
Was there a connection in thing? Was there, first of all, I asked about the judge, about Judge Toller. Was there a connection between him and Nina? And is there a Toller?
Toller, who's the notorious hanging judge, he was, we'll say, Lord Norbury, John Toller. He was born in Nina in 3rd of December 1760. And he sat on the bench, and he was well in his 80s when he eventually retired off the bench. And
well, is there a Toller Street in Nina?
No, there was a place known as Norbury Lane, one of the lanes of Nina, and that's subsequently became Dohney Place.
Yeah. And how did he become? How was he connected to Nina? How Toller?
His family had a big estate on the outskirts of Nina, like the first title that Norbury gained, which was for his work in the passage of the Act of Union. Like, he was the Attorney General at the time of the Act of Union, and for his work in getting the Act of Union passed, his wife was given the title of Baroness Norwood of Ballycrenowood, which are two localities outside Nina. Now, Toller would have spent a lot of time in Nina, and the family were there right up to the 1940s. His family would have been one of the wealthiest families in Ireland when he died. Like, one of his boasts was that he left Nina with 10 shillings and a brace of silver pistols, and he's supposed to have fought his way, or jeweled his way, to the top, because he was a famous duelist, having actually called Daniel O'Connell, we'll say, to the field on one occasion, which led to tremendous enmity between himself and O'Connell. O'Connell caused himself to be arrested when he was due to fight a duel with Peel in France. Dueling was illegal in England at the time, and he challenged Peel to a duel, and Peel subsequently travelled over to France for the duel. But when O'Connell arrived in Folkestone to travel, he was asked the purpose of his travel, and he actually declared he was going for a duel. So he was immediately arrested, so that the duel couldn't take place. Now, subsequently, O'Connell appeared pleading a case on behalf of a client before Norbury, and O'Connell is supposed to have said I'm afraid his lordship doesn't apprehend me, as in understand me. But Norbury quickly reiterated to him, he said, on the contrary, he said, Mr. O'Connell is quite easily apprehended whenever he wishes to be so, which was a slight on O'Connell.
Yeah.
And
that
was the advent of absolute unbridled enmity between the two of them. I mean, they never passed a civil word to each other after that.
Yeah. Actually, lately now, I'm digressing again, which I always do. I heard the talk given by, what's his name, Tom, out in Skeeton, Canon, you know what I mean? Canon Patrick.
Comerford.
Patrick Comerford. He gave a talk lately about a Limerick family, and whose name again escapes me, but they came from Brooke Watson House, which was on, I think it was...
You're thinking of the Bernals.
Bernals.
No, they had Limerick connections. Yeah, Samuel Bernal actually came from Limerick. He was a Jewish merchant.
Yeah.
And he came to Nina, and he actually converted to Catholicism when
he did denounce this, yeah.
And a son of his was actually a famous physicist, and actually designed was part of the designers of the Mulberry Harbours. He actually developed the type of roadway that they laid on those Mulberry Harbours.
That's what the talk was on, John. That's what the talk was about the physicist, about who he was, and where he'd come from. That's what the talk was. But Bernal, because they had an auction house in Thomas Street in Limerick, Bernal said. And it was about that, you know. And just happened to mention Brooke Watson House, and I knew where Brooke Watson House was. Who was the man? I remember hearing a few years ago, Paul could be one of the family. There was a man, seemingly he was about 19, he was still driving into Nina. Would that be one of them? Does it mean anything to you?
Kevin O'Bernal, yeah.
Yes.
Kevin drove right up to, I'd say, a short time before his death. He would have been quite elderly. Another extremely interesting character. I mean, he worked for Fords. He actually worked on the assembly line of the Model T Fords. He was an engineer by profession. He worked on designing the assembly line for the Model T Fords. And he was a very well-known photographer. He actually left a fantastic archive of photographs, would say, which people would still refer to this day in relation to Nina and that. But he pioneered a lot of developments. He had his own dairy, fantastic herd of Frisian, and he supplied. He would have been an independent dairy, supplying milk into Nina, I suppose into the late 80s, early 90s even.
Yeah. I heard that he was in his 90s anyway, when he used to drive his own car into Nina, no problem.
The last car he had, I believe, would have been a big 3-litre Rover, one of the old Rovers.
Yeah.
I remember a black car with white upholstery, white leather upholstery, and a walnut dash.
Yeah.
Absolutely beautiful car.
Funny, he just come to my mind there now. I never met the man, but I remember Patrick Comerford referring, he was on about Bernal and about the physicist and one thing and another. And I just thought to myself about him. I couldn't interrupt him. Oh, it was a Zoom talk, and I couldn't get in and say, I heard of him, But it's funny. But yes, we're digressing again, Nina. Who else were the big landowners around Nina? Can you think of? Did the Pretties have anything got to do with Nina?
But the Pretties would have been who were 3 times, we'll say, Lord Lieutenants of Tipperary, or MPs for Tipperary. They built Kilby House at Dalla, where we'll say it's now owned by the Ryan family. But the Pretties, or O'Callaghan Pretties, Lord Denali's, that would have been one of the bigger estates outside Nina.
Outside Nina, yeah.
The Tollers, as you mentioned, the Ottoways in Castle Ottawa, Willingtons in Ballymackey, they would have been kind of the principal families around Nina.
There's another house
who,
was
of course, would say who owned it, Nina.
Yeah, there's another lovely house restored out there. It was belonged to the Peppers, and the left-hand side you were going out in Nina. It was restored by somebody in Nina. It's just in off the road a bit.
Lisniski House.
What?
Lisniski.
Lisniski. Yeah. I mean, that's a beautiful job.
Yeah, that was, well, the family that owned that, Sheehan's, they're hardware merchants in Nina, like big hardware business. So it would have had access to the materials needed for.
Yeah, they did a lovely job. The house was in such a bad state, I remember.
Yeah, I mean, tremendous credit due to them for the job.
Yeah, I haven't been on that road now for a long time, but I was remember passing the house.
There's a house opposite that now, in the process of being restored as well. It's going to be turned into a kind of a holistic centre.
Which house?
It's gone, Tony.
At the family, yeah. Just thinking, you know what that is.
Excuse me.
Yeah, because that you remember a priest back in Jordan I met a few times, Father Weiss.
I do indeed. Yeah.
He was good for history around.
He was one of the
Roach Williams.
Canon White was one of the founding members of the Ormond Historical Society.
Well, see, I met him a few times. And Roach Williams, did you know Roach Williams up in Jordan?
I did indeed, yeah.
Yeah, I knew him as well. They were good for history in Jordan, but we'll cover Jordan some other time. You know, we'll come back to that. I'm looking here, we've just gone to an hour anyway already, you know. So we never even touched on the War of Independence, of course. Was very big around Nina, wasn't it?
The 1st Tipperary Brigade were based in Nina. Would you believe just there about 6 weeks ago, we remember one of the final ambushes, the Moderini ambush, in which 4 policemen were killed. That took place just outside Nina, about 7 miles.
Moderini, is it?
Moderini.
Yeah. That was a dancer's house, wasn't it?
And it was Sean Gaynor who actually did that ambush. Now, he had taken over from the leader of the Flying Column for that ambush. The leader of the Flying Column at the time was a man by the name of Jack Collison, and the two of them were in charge of that ambush. Subsequently, they went different ways in the Civil War, with Jack Collison being killed up outside Abbey Leaks.
Anything to the Collisons now that came from Germany, or say?
He would be a great granduncle of the two Collison boys.
Joking, I say. I didn't know that. I was only bad happened there, though.
I know that, Tony, because Tom told me.
There you go. That John Collison is just after buying the Devisi property. It was says the crow flies literally 2 kilometers from that house in Abbey Leaks. His great granduncle was shot dead. We said a follow up of an ambush on a Free State patrol.
Yeah.
Himself and another Nina man, Austin McCurtain, died together in that. Austin McCurtain would have been the 2nd highest ranking officer in the National Army after Michael Collins. He was OC of the 3rd Southern Division of the Irish Army. He was only 21 years of age when he was shot dead. But say he would have been the 2nd highest ranking officer in the army.
Are you familiar with that, Tom? Some of that?
No. Tom told me didn't touch that one, no.
Tom told me we'll come to a week to finish off that story, you know.
Yeah.
There was a battle for Nina fought in the Civil War. Let's say 28th of June, night of 27th of June, 1922. The anti-treaty IRA moved into Nina, took over a lot of strategic buildings there in the centre of the town and attempted to hold them. And at the time, the National Army were in the military barracks at the top of the town that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So the soldiers came out from the National Army, advanced down the town, and they also, let's say, tried to do flanking movements around the side of the town. But the anti-treaty side were dug in well, and the conflict ensued all through that Friday, the 29th of June. And it was the following day, actually, Austin McCurtain, who was OC 3rd Southern Division, brought an armoured car from Roscrea and reinforcements. Now, there was an attempt to halt them outside Nina, but they managed to break through there on the Dublin side of Nina, and they got into the centre of town. And of course, once the armoured car was there in the town, the anti-treaty lads were only armed with machine gun. They had a couple of machine guns, but mainly 303 rifles. So there was no match for the armoured car, and the armoured car managed to dislodge them. Now, 13 men stayed behind and fought a rearguard action for the main party to evacuate the town. And they actually went out through Silver Street in the direction of the silver mines. But there was over 160 men, would say, involved in that evacuation. And 13 men, they're listed actually in military archives. About 8 of them would have been from the town and 5 from the hinterland of the town that fought that rearguard action, if you like. But there's a famous photograph of the takeover of the barracks during the war, let's say at the end of the War of Independence in 1922, of the North Tipperary lads that went into the barracks. Now, it was taken over by the Laois men under Captain Terence Byrne, who was killed in that Civil War fight. And he was shot outside the front door of the Hibernian Hotel there in Nina. But the photograph of the North Tipperary lads that went into the barrack that day, you could literally draw a line down the centre of the photograph as to who went on either side in the Civil War. And there's probably 5 of them in the photograph that were actually killed in the Civil War, ranging from a young lad of 16 years of age up to Jack Collison, we'll say, in his 30s.
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, God.
And another connection we have into Civil War there in Nina is Sonny O'Neill is actually buried in the old abbey in Tioan in Nina. Now, Sonny is reputed to be the person that actually shot Michael Collins, and he claimed himself that for his sins he was the one that had to live with the fact that he had shot Collins.
Yeah, he was at the ambush, all right. But,
yeah, he was. Well,
I think
I interviewed about 6 families, we'll say, in the Nina hinterland, and even in Castleconnell. And Sonny O'Neill would have claimed to each and every one of them that he was the person that, as I say, had to live with the shadow of having shot Collins.
I believe that it could be any, like, it was a ricochet, so it could be anybody.
Well, according to O'Neill, it wasn't a ricochet; it was a direct shot. Now, he claimed 2 hits that day. He claimed he hit Collins, and he also claimed that he hit Lieutenant Smith, who joined the convoy in Limerick, as a motorcycle outrider. He had a very lucky escape. He was actually hitting one of the vertebrae in the neck, which took a lump out of the vertebrae, and one bullet came out through his collarbone, taking half the collarbone with it. Yeah.
But is there any other, like, apart from Sonny O'Neill, I'm not calling him a liar or anything, but is there any other people who have corroborated his?
Well, O'Neill actually went to Johnny Collins, Michael Collins' brother, in 1935, and told Johnny Collins that he was the person that shot Michael, his brother.
Yeah.
And subsequently, the family became very close friends to that. And I've actually taken members of the Collins family to Sonny O'Neill's grave. Members of the Collins family regularly come to Nina to visit Sonny O'Neill's grave. So I would say that they believe it.
All right. Yeah,
we'll leave it at that. John, myself and Tom, we thank you for coming
on.
Thank
you, John.
Thanks for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Some great conversation there.
That's it. Well, when you're
okay, John, thanks.
And best luck with the series, lads.
Okay, thanks, John.
Yeah, when you're with people that have, I suppose, a like mind, it's like anybody really. You know what you're talking about, and you can follow someone along. It's good.
It's good, yeah.
Okay, John. Thank you very much.
Right.
And you.